The Pentagon said on Wednesday that U.S. strikes 10 days ago had degraded Iran's nuclear program by up to 2 years. That comes after last week's far more cautious assessment leaked to the public, which suggested the strikes may have only set back the program by months. Here's Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell.
I think we're thinking probably closer to 2 years, like degraded their program by 2 years.
U.S. military bombers carried out heavy strikes against 3 Iranian nuclear facilities on June 22nd. President Donald Trump said almost immediately after they took place that Iran's program had been obliterated. However, such conclusions often take the U.S. intelligence community weeks or more to determine. Then, last week, a preliminary assessment from the Defense Intelligence Agency suggested that the strikes may have only set back Iran's nuclear program by months. But Trump administration officials said that DIA assessment was low confidence and had been overtaken by intelligence showing Iran's nuclear program was severely damaged. Doubts about the efficacy of the U.S. strikes were raised again last weekend, when the head of the UN nuclear watchdog said that Iran could be producing enriched uranium in a few months. Several experts have also cautioned that Iran likely moved a stockpile of near-weapons-grade highly enriched uranium out of the deeply buried Fordo site before the strikes and could be hiding it. But U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said last week he was unaware of any intelligence suggesting that. In an interview broadcast by CBS News on Tuesday, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said the Fordo site had been, quote, seriously and heavily damaged.
The Pentagon has halted some shipments of air defense missiles to Ukraine, sources familiar with the decision said on Tuesday. Other precision munitions are also affected, prompted by concerns that US stockpiles are too low. The sources said it amounts to the slowing of some weapons shipments promised to Kyiv by former President Joe Biden's administration. Air defense interceptors to help knock down Russian drones and projectiles were said to be among the items delayed. In recent weeks, Russia has intensified air attacks on Ukraine's cities, on several nights, launching hundreds of drones and missiles at a time, leading to widespread damage and an increase in civilian casualties. Fedor Venislavsky, a member of the Ukrainian Parliament's National Security and Defense Committee, called the decision painful, though he was hopeful of a resolution.
This decision is certainly very unpleasant for us. It's painful, and against the background of the terrorist attacks which Russia commits against Ukraine, against peaceful towns, cities, villages, citizens of Ukraine that die almost every day from such terrorist attacks.
In Kyiv, people on the street met the news with resignation.
It's the choice of the US, so be it. This cannot be a reason for us to let our hands down and not continue fighting until the end.
Since US President Donald Trump took office in January, he has softened Washington's position toward Russia. He has sought a diplomatic solution to the war in Ukraine and raised doubts about future US military support for Kyiv's war effort. Ukraine is already experiencing a shortage of 155mm ammunition used for artillery on the front lines, said one Ukrainian defense source. However, last week, Trump said he was considering selling more Patriot air defense missiles to Ukraine, following a meeting with his Ukrainian counterpart, President Volodymyr Zelensky. Russia, which already controls about a fifth of Ukraine, has been preparing a summer ground offensive, advancing gradually in parts of the east and northeast. In an email, the Pentagon said it was providing Trump with options to continue military aid to Ukraine, in line with the goal of ending Russia's war there, but no new policy has been announced.
Terry Kilgore of Altadena, California, lost some of his most prized possessions in the devastating Eaton fire 6 months ago. His guitars. The musician, who once toured with former Van Halen frontman David Lee Roth, said he was able to save 5 guitars that he grabbed on his way out the door to evacuate. Now, the 70-year-old plays them passionately in an RV on the property where his home once stood. He spoke to Reuters in June.
What the hell? I don't like RVs. I don't want to live in one. But at this point in time, that thing's a godsend because it would either be that or some low-rent tomb downtown.
6 months after wildfires laid waste to the eastern and western flanks of Los Angeles, Kilgore is still surrounded by empty lots where family homes burned to the ground.
You would never know it because it was pretty here, and it's never going to be pretty like it was.
He's just one of the area's survivors coping with the disaster as the arduous rebuilding effort continues.
The place I grew up is gone forever. It's a memory. And I think a lot of people feel that way. I mean, there's a few survivors, but I know a lot of good people that really got hurt here. They got hurt.
Kilgore says he's trying to make the best of the situation.
This is the hard part, cold water shade. If you lived up here, whether you paid rent or not, you're still part of the trauma. It was very traumatic.
The fires, which broke out on January 7th, killed 22 people, destroyed nearly 12,000 homes, and caused an estimated $24 to nearly $54 billion in property damage alone. That's according to a report by the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation. Progress in rebuilding has exceeded initial expectations, according to LA city and county officials. A spokesperson for LA Mayor Karen Bass said about 75% of the roughly 4,400 residential lots destroyed or severely damaged in the city have been cleared of debris and are certified for rebuilding.
Good enough for government work? What a mess.
Still, many homeowners, including Kilgore, have complaints about the process.
You hear this noise here? How do you sleep through that shit? And listen, they're moving away from us, but we had dump trucks and cranes. There's no sleeping here in the early day. And I'm a night owl, so I can't stop. Actually, my best energy is at night. It's like the sun's not on because it gets warm up here. What I'm going to happen to this place, I don't know. I may have to sell it. I'm going to get a settlement. If the settlement's really good, I'll sell it. If the settlement's really bad, I'll sell it. It looks like I'm going to sell.
While Kilgore said he'll likely sell his property, he certainly isn't giving up on music. He said his main goal is to re-record all his original music that was lost in the fire.
It could spell relief for companies like Nike. Donald Trump says he will put 20% tariffs on Vietnam's exports to the US. That was lower than expected, meaning it may be good news for firms like the sportswear giant, which makes many of its goods in the country. Trump announced the news in a social media post on Wednesday, and it comes just days before his July 9th deadline for countries to strike trade deals. Vietnam had faced a 46% tariff from that day without the new agreement. However, details on the pact were in short supply. It wasn't immediately clear which products the 20% rate would apply to, or whether some goods could face lower or higher duties. The Vietnamese government offered no such details in a statement celebrating what it called a trade framework. But it said it would commit to providing preferential access for US goods in return, including for large-engined cars. Under the deal, transshipments from third countries through Vietnam will still face a 40% levy. That's aimed at products largely made in China, but then labelled as made in Vietnam. But one trade expert told Reuters that transshipping was an ill-defined term, subject to a lot of interpretation. Talks with Vietnam had been closely watched, with the country a fast-growing export powerhouse. Since 2018, its shipments to the US have nearly trebled, from less than $50 billion that year to $137 billion in 2024. By contrast, US exports to the country have risen only 30% over the same period. Attention now turns to other possible deals. Trump has said he's optimistic about agreement with India, but expressed doubts over any deal with Japan.